Hello everyone, and welcome to the Unanswered Questions True Crime Podcast.
I have spent hours and hours investigating this.
He basically told her that people have been killed. Journalists, independent investigators, people like that disappeared. It frightened her to the bone.
There's more to the story than meets the eye.
There were rumors of torture and homicide and sexual abuse, all sorts of egregious, horrendous crimes.
He was polygraphed 3 times. Each of those 3 showed evasions.
His resumes were a skeleton of truth.
He was mad at the world, and particularly mad at the government.
The study that he commissioned had described a fictional terrorist attack.
If people have died over this, it means you're getting close to the truth.
You don't have to be a conspiracy theorist to say, what the fuck?
Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of my new podcast, Unanswered Questions, where every week we'll endeavour to discuss a mysterious unsolved case that has many lingering unanswered questions. So I hope you enjoy, and as always, leave me some feedback on what you think about the show, and rate it as well. Now on to the show. This week we'll be talking about Gordan Novel. Now, Gordan Michael Duane Novel, born February 7th of 1938 and died on October 3rd, 2012, was a private investigator and electronics expert who was known for several controversial investigations. He was most notable for his conflict with District Attorney Jim Garrison and his work as an investigator for automobile industry executive John DeLorean and U.S. Attorney General Ramsey Clark. Now we get into his early life. Novel grew up in New Orleans, living as an only child with his mother. He graduated from East Jefferson High School in 1956, spent a brief period studying engineering at Northrop Aeronautical Institute of Technology, the University of Southern California, and tried motion picture directing classes at the Pasadena Playhouse. He met his former wife, Marlene Mancuso, Miss New Orleans of 1958, at the Louisiana State University. Now we get into his career. In 1960, Novel bought a drag strip in Hammond, Louisiana, together with associate Rani, I'm going to butcher this name, Ellinger. Later, he produced auto shows in New Orleans, Baton Rouge, and Atlanta. Now we get to the Bay of Pigs weapons. In February of 1961, Novel was part of a group of people which stole weapons from a munitions bunker in Homer, Louisiana, which was owned by the Schlumberger Company. Novel claimed the theft had been planned by Guy Bannister and David Ferry, who at the time were actively involved in the anti-communist/anti-Castro groups. According to a report in the New Orleans States Item newspaper, Bannister served as a munitions supplier for the 1961 Bay of Pigs invasion and continued to deal weapons from his office until 1963. Gus Russo has written about the existence of a letter of marque signed by Robert F. Kennedy, who was a U.S. Attorney General at the time, which supposedly gave Bannister the go-ahead to liberate the weaponry, although the letter has never been proved to have existed. Novel claimed to have received a key to the bunker from Bannister. The stolen munitions were allegedly stored at Bannister's office in Camp Street, New Orleans, and at Ferry's house. Novel claimed that the act was not illegal, but had been arranged by the CIA as part of Operation Mongoose. While taking a lie detector test, Novel stated that the burglary was not a burglary at all, but a war materials pickup made at the direction of his CIA contact. Now we get to the 1964 New York World's Fair. In the early 1960s, Novel served as Director of Operations for the Bourbon Street Pavilion at the 1964 New York World's Fair. The pavilion reportedly achieved the highest gross income of any single commercial pavilion at the fair. For his work, Novel was called an entrepreneurial prodigy and boy wonder in Variety. From the beginning of the fair's build-up in 1963, he handled publicity at the pavilion using the name G. Michael Novel. He gave several interviews to the press. Variety magazine recognized him as being the major entertainment buyer in charge of the pavilion's entertainment policies and originally active in obtaining backing for the venture. Owner and founder of the Mardi Gras World, Blaine Kern, worked with Novel at both the 1964 World's Fair and the 1984 Louisiana World Exposition. Now we come to the New Orleans business. After the World Fair closed, Novel moved back to New Orleans, where he set up a business focused on electronic eavesdropping. Through his company, International Dynamics Corp., he manufactured and installed electronics for politicians, businessmen, and diplomats. He also bought and leased a Caribbean-style restaurant called Jamaican Village Inn, which was located at 800 North Rampart Street. While Novel was in Ohio, resisting Garrison's attempts to get him extradited, 2 waitresses of the club were arrested in charge of violating obscenity law for top topless table serving. The club was ordered to be padlocked closed for 1 year by the District Attorney's Office. This order was withdrawn after the club owner, Edward Center, agreed to end the topless attire, while the lease to Novel was ruled invalid. Now we come to his conflict with Garrison. First we have the work at Garrison's office. According to the final report issued by the Assassination Records Review Board, Novel came to the attention of Garrison after allegedly making claims that he was an employee of the CIA in 1963 and knew both Lee Harvey Oswald and Jack Ruby. Journalist Dick J. Revis has stated that Novel's work at Garrison's office was amply documented and quoted Novel saying, quote, "I was working at Garrison's chief of security while at the same time working for the White House to destabilize Garrison's operation," end quote. In 1997, an FBI report was released which stated that Novel worked with Garrison's attempt to fake photographic evidence to link Fidel Castro with the assassination. Then we come to the Shaw hearing witness subpoena. During Clay Shaw's preliminary hearing, Novel was twice subpoenaed to appear before the Orleans Parish Grand Jury. The second time, Novel did not show up while he had left the state. In order to get Novel extradited, Garrison's office issued 2 warrants for Novel's arrest. The first arrest warrant was based on him being a material witness in the Clay Shaw investigation, which historically labelled him as the missing witness in Garrison's assassination conspiracy theory. The second arrest warrant was based on a new accusation. Garrison accused Novel of having burglarized the munitions bunker in Houma. During the same time frame, on the 25th of May 1967, the New Orleans States item published a detailed article on the Clay Shaw case. In that article, the New Orleans States item produced a handwritten letter that experts identified as Novel's handwriting, which referred to a CIA connection to his advertising agency. Until then, Novel had publicly denied any CIA connections. After the letter was revealed, Novel's attorney, Steve Plotkin, said that Novel wrote the letter and that Novel had CIA connections in New Orleans. While holding off his extradition, Novel organized a news conference in Columbus, Ohio, where he publicly defended himself against Garrison's accusations of burglary. During the conference, reporters were told that there were CIA operations in New Orleans. An advertising agency in New Orleans, which was operated by Novel, did indeed serve as a CIA front, that the raid on the Houma munitions bunker was a patriotic act. Later on, Plotkin further specified Novel's role as an intermediary, but added that Novel's work had little or nothing to do with the Bay of Pigs invasion, and certainly had absolutely nothing to do with the assassination of Robert F. Kennedy, end quote. The extradition proceedings were eventually dropped on the 3rd of July 1967 due to defects and incomplete extradition papers. Now we come to the Novel versus Garrison Playboy libel suit. In October 1967 interview for Playboy magazine, Garrison accused Novel of being a paid employee of the CIA and hinted at complicity in the JFK assassination. Subsequently, Novel filed a $10 million libel suit against Garrison and Playboy in federal court, being represented by Elmer Gertz, who was an expert in reputation damage and smear campaigns. In his book To Life, Gertz stated that Novel's deposition ran into hundreds if not thousands of pages. End quote. Eventually, the case did not come to trial, but was instead dismissed by Judge William J. Campbell after the defendants moved for a reconsideration of their motions. Now we come to the J. Edgar Hoover allegations. In an episode of the PBS program Frontline, aired on February 9th of 1993, Novel said he saw photos of FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover engage in oral sex with his aide Clyde Tolson. The episode incorporated the work of author Anthony Summers, whose book Official and Confidential, The Secret Life of J. Edgar Hoover, alleged that Novel said he was shown the photo by CIA counterintelligence chief James Jesus Angleton.
Irving Resnick, who was the Las Vegas representative of the big New England mob family, said in 1971 that Lansky was the one who had, quote, nailed J. Edgar Hoover.
I remember Ash Resnick at the Caesar's Palace. He used to be the manager of the nightclub there. He told me that Meyer Lansky had some pretty strong evidence that Hoover and Tolson were both homosexuals.
When he was asked what that meant, he said that Lansky had obtained photographs of Hoover in a compromising situation with Clyde Tolson.
One man who actually claims to have seen such photographs is Gordan Novel, a controversial figure with connections to the intelligence community. Novel, who had worked for the White House in the early 1960s, became involved in a complicated legal action which the White House wanted him to pursue but which Hoover wanted dropped.
So I went to the White House, and the White House sent me to Mr. Angleton, Director of Counterintelligence, CIA. We met in a restaurant, and I told him my problem, and he says, I know what your problem is. He said, you need to tell Mr. Hoover that you've met with me and that you're not going to dismiss the lawsuit and that you've seen this. At which point he opened up his briefcase and pulled out a couple of photographs of Mr. Hoover in flagrante delicto, I guess is one way to describe it. Having oral sex.
This testimony does not stand alone. I talked to a former regular officer in the OSS, that's the predecessor of the CIA, who said that after the war, he went to dinner with other OSS American intelligence colleagues, and that after dinner, when over the brandy stage, when conversation turned to the private lives of public people, his host went out of the room and then came back with a photograph. And this was passed around the table, and the photograph showed two men, Hoover and Tolson, engaged in homosexual activity.
In New Orleans, where the CIA and the Mafia had sometimes collaborated, Mafia Don Carlos Marcello told Gordan Novel that he, too, had seen a photograph.
I had volunteered the information that I had seen a picture of Mr. Hoover in performing oral sex, and he said that he had seen it, too, and that had been used to keep the FBI, but not the Justice Department, off the back of the mob.
Now we come to Watergate. In 1974, columnist Jack Anderson wrote that Charles Colson consulted Novel on the possible use of a degaussing device that would erase copies of the Watergate tapes stored in the White House and the CIA from a distance. Eventually, Colson and Novel mutually decided not to do this because of its danger to other national security tapes and computers. According to Colson, the plan never came close to development. Then we come to the New Orleans firebomb case. Jim Garrison's successor to the seat of District Attorney Harry Connick Sr. brought charges against Novel for conspiracy to firebomb part of New Orleans by balloons on behalf of a World's Fair Novel was promoting. After 3 previous prosecutions that included a hung jury, a mistrial and a conviction with 3-year sentence, the conviction was overturned due to tremendous conflicts in government testimony. Columnist Jack Anderson reported that eminent legal scholars say a 4th prosecution in a non-capital case is virtually unprecedented and raises the issue of retaliatory prosecution. Connick denied that there was intention to persecute Novel. Then we come to DeLorean. Novel worked as private investigator to the DeLorean Motor Company chairman John DeLorean in 1982 and subsequently became a business partner. DeLorean claimed that there was a conspiracy between Britain's Conservative Party and U.S. and British intelligence agents to close DeLorean's manufacturing plant in Northern Ireland. DeLorean's claims relied on Gordan Novel's investigation and resulting evidence. The alleged conspiracy included an attempt to frame and trap DeLorean for cocaine trafficking, against which DeLorean eventually successfully defended himself in the resulting lawsuit. Part of the defense was an audio tape which was made public by Hustler magazine publisher Larry Flynt, which revealed DeLorean was the victim of a sting operation. When Flynt refused to name Novel as the supplier of the tape, he was charged and convicted to 5.5 months sentence for contempt of court. Now we come to Waco. Novel was hired as chief investigator by former U.S. Attorney General Ramsey Clark in the aftermath of the Waco siege of 1993, which I will cover in a later episode. Ramsey Clark provided legal counsel for some of the surviving members of Branch Davidian, as well as more than 100 family members of those who had died or were injured in the confrontation. Novel has stated that his analysis of a flare tape made by Night Stalker aircraft indicates serious misconduct, e.g. federal agents firing upon people inside the compound while they were trying to flee the fire. Former CIA Director William Colby collaborated with Novel on the investigation of misconduct on the higher levels of command, including the FBI. Novel originated allegations that U.S. federal agents were guilty of murdering David Koresh's followers during the Waco siege. And finally, we come to his celebrity advice. As a private investigator, Novel gave strategic advice to various celebrities, among which were Michael Jackson and Jean-Claude Van Damme. With that, this case remains open, but with many unanswered questions that still remain unanswered. Please rate the show and let me know what you guys think about this and the many other cases I've covered. You can follow me on all major social media platforms, YouTube, BitChute, Dailymotion. I'm also on Twitter and Instagram, links are all down below in the description. If you have a case you'd like me to have a look at or cover, don't hesitate to send me a message. I'm your host, and this has been the Unanswered Questions Podcast. Until next time, next on Unanswered Questions. The 27 Club is an informal list consisting mostly of popular musicians, artists, actors, and other celebrities who died at age 27.